What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY and the overall markets. I'm going to break down what's going on with the QQQ moving forward, talk about our economic calendar, which you should be watching for as time goes on for the broader markets. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total. And the offer ends very soon at the end of March. Anyways, as far as the market is going, looking at Tesla right now, we have a nice inverse head and shoulders like pattern, but whether or not we see a bounce or a rejection is going to depend on some key levels. I'll talk more about these levels in just a couple of minutes, but I first want to talk about some news. News is coming out and it's going on about how Elon Musk has made a lot of predictions about Tesla in the past, but he is saying that 2025 will be a very pivotal year for Tesla when it comes to setting themselves up for a lot of growth because they're planning on launching their unsupervised FSD version as soon as June in the state of Texas and then different parts of California and eventually more parts of the US as a whole. And then eventually they're planning on expanding it as time goes on to different regions. So that's what the main goal is. They're trying to continue to improve the technology so that they could bring it out and eventually achieve autonomous driving. And their main goal is to essentially continue to expand this and eventually bring out the robotaxi network. On top of this, they are planning on releasing Optimus, at least for Tesla itself. They want to release and develop these AI robotics so that they could develop humanoid robots to start doing tasks within their own factories. And they're planning on building around 5,000 or so, maybe even more, depending on how things end up going. So that's what the plan is. We'll see if things end up going this way. But the main thing is that once they get the basis set, when they have like a prototype of their humanoid robots, then they eventually start like at least mass producing them to some extent, getting a few thousand out. When that comes out, and then they eventually have their unsupervised FSD launched, that's going to set the stones for the next couple of years when they start expanding on all of this, when they start bringing in a lot more revenue and doing a lot of things like that. So that's going to be very important. I'm seeing headlines going on about how the Model Y is going to be very imminent. That's another big factor for Tesla and hopefully can help to offset their decline in sales. That's going to be another big factor, at least for the time being. But besides that, I'm seeing a lot of talk about politics. I don't really want to get involved in that. And that's all I'm really seeing, at least for the time being. So that's very, very important, guys. So please keep that at least in mind. For other pieces of news, we're seeing a lot of analysts from Morgan Stanley who are saying that you should be buying Nvda ahead of earnings. They're very, very excited about this. Earnings is going to be on February 26th, about 9 days from now. It's very exciting, so get ready for that, and we'll see what this leads to. There's a lot of optimism, and I think that this could really help the share price push as we approach the big event. So keep that in mind. Also, guys, today is President's Day. The stock market is closed. The last time we closed was on Friday. We saw Nvidia trying to push alongside Apple. Some stocks like Tesla were flat, and we saw other tech stocks a little bit in the red from like Amazon to Microsoft, but very mixed market so far. Keep in mind, the stock market is closed for the day, so is the bonds market, but things will be opening again like normal starting tomorrow. So I'll be back tomorrow morning before market open to give you guys another update. Another couple of pieces of news involve like Donald Trump and what's happening with our economic calendar. So Donald Trump has said he's going to be once again imposing reciprocal tariffs on different countries out there. And he mentioned that this is going to be based off what they charge the US. So, for example, if you have like India charging the US 20% for particular commodities or certain goods, the US is going to charge India that much for tariffs as well. If India wants lower tariffs, then their main goal or their main move would be to lower tariffs, if anything, back on the US. So that's what Donald Trump's strategy has been so far. He also mentioned he's going to be increasing tariffs on cars, on semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and factors like that. So keep that in mind. Donald Trump said a lot of things for the last couple of days. I haven't had another major update since the last time I spoke about him on Friday. So we'll see if he says anything else. For now, this is what we're essentially looking for. For the economic calendar, keep in mind that for Monday, it's very quiet. We just got a couple of Fed speakers today, but tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, February 18th. Before the market opens, we have the Empire State Manufacturing Index coming out. Besides that, everything else is quite minor with just a couple of like bill auctions, nothing else that's too crazy. So please keep that in mind, guys. The majority of our data, the majority of the news that's coming out is quite minor, nothing way too serious. When it comes to other factors as well, I want to add that the fear and greed index is currently at fear. That's making up the majority of sentiment. We'll have to see how things are moving from here, at least as time goes on. Momentum is quite neutral. And then we also have the put to call option ratio at greed. This was going up quite a bit for the last couple of days because there's a lot of people who were buying shorts, anticipating that our higher CPIs, higher inflationary numbers, alongside the data that came out from Donald Trump's tariffs would cause downside. Instead, that's the reason why the market makers squeezed shorts. They caused an opposite reaction because sentiment was really, really bearish, and people were expecting some kind of like big pullback, which never really came. Instead, the market squeezed shorts, and it did not really give shorts a good exit opportunity. Last thing, keep in mind that for the week, we have quite a few earnings coming out. So we have lots of Chinese earnings coming out on Monday. Then on Tuesday, we have Etsy, Wix, and a few more announcing their earnings. So get ready for that. We also have Carvana. And then Thursday is going to be very, very important because we have Alibaba, Walmart, and Rivian. So in the morning, we have like Alibaba and Walmart. Alibaba is going to be a big one for a lot of the Chinese tickers. So I'd recommend just watching those just to be safe. Walmart's as well may affect retail to some extent, maybe not like way too much. And then Rivian's going to be another one out there for lots of EVs in case you guys are interested in looking at that one. That's going to be very impactful, especially as the share price is looking bullish right now. We'll show you guys that in just a couple of minutes. But that's what we're essentially looking for, at least thus far. Now, when it comes to other pieces of news, keep in mind that that's what we're looking for. And then as time goes on, by Friday, there's not really a whole lot else that's coming out. So that being said, let's talk about the share prices. What do I think is going to happen to SPY, Tesla, and the others? Let's break down these overall targets. So what's good about Tesla is the possibility of there being an inverse head and shoulders right here, right? We have a possible left shoulder, a head, and then a right shoulder, which is very, very awesome. For Tesla to remain bullish, you want to see it essentially break 362. If we break 362, we're looking for an attempt to really push higher for like 375 plus. If Tesla's bearish, you want to see us lose the low of the day from Friday. If we lose 348, we're looking for an attempt to dip to like the low 340s all the way down to 342 or below. So lose 348, we're bearish. Break 362, we're more bullish. And we'll see which way Tesla goes, at least for now. So please keep that in mind. That's going to be very, very impactful for the way in which things are going to be moving. So please keep that in mind. For other factors out there, you also want to be looking at how the news is going to be affecting Tesla. So please keep that in mind, guys. That's going to be very impactful as well. So that's going to be another big factor. But for now, we're going to be looking to see which way we end up breaking. I'm going to give you guys my prediction in just a minute. When you look at the daily time frame on Tesla, we're showing an uptrend right now. But we still have this much larger downtrend that's still present if you look at like the daily and the 4-hour time frames. So just keep that in mind. The 4-hour is technically on a downtrend. It's making lower highs and lower lows consistently, continuing to fall. So we'll have to see how this goes, at least for us moving forward. So what's my view of Tesla? What do I think is going to happen right now? I think that although we're on a much larger downtrend, it has some potential to push, especially as Nvidia is starting to pump here in the market, may attempt to do so. Looking at the 4-hour PPO, we might see a little bit of a dip on Tesla to retest like the mid 340s, but I think we might try to hold this support. And there's going to be one more attempt to get back up to about 362. We'll see if Tesla could break 362. If we do that, I'm looking for 375. So there might be one more attempt to push later on for the week. A dip and a bounce is very probable because we're starting to get some good news for Tesla. The news is not as negative so far, and the whole market may try to push a bit more, which could drag Tesla a bit higher. So I'm seeing potential, at least on the 4-hour, for a dip and a bounce. Might be retesting 348 or so before it tries to break out for 365 and eventually these higher levels. So I anticipate this to be the most likely possibility. Watch 362 to see if we break that to really start pushing. You might see a dip first before it tries to bounce, but that's what I'm anticipating for the time being. And here's exactly why. So it's not just Tesla that's doing this, it's also the broader markets. When you look at SPY, as we break 610, we tend to push up to about 612 and 615. Those are going to be our bullish targets if we break past the 610s. If we lose 608, we're looking for an attempt to dip to about 605 or below. My gut tells me what's likely going to happen is that we're at a tough resistance, right? Every time SPY hits 608 to 610, we do tend to get some kind of rejection. Might be a small rejection this time before we see an attempt to break out much higher, back up to like 615 or so. Why do I say that? Because we're holding support right here where the EMAs happen to be. So it would be very healthy if we get a small dip first before we see a breakout like this. I think this is the most likely possibility. So look for a dip back down towards that 606, 607 area, small little dip by a couple of points before we see a lot of buyers who come back and start pushing us higher. So why is that? Here's what's going on. What's happening is that we could be looking for a small dip before we try to bounce. If we lose 602, we're looking for a bigger dump. And if we end up breaking past the 610s, we're looking for a bigger push. My gut tells me it's going to be a small dip towards the 606 area before we see some buyers defend and push us right back up to new all-time highs because we remain very, very bullish, at least technically speaking, especially as we're breaking past this resistance. So please keep that in mind. For the QQQ, we're looking more bullish. You have an inverse head and shoulders like pattern as the left shoulder heading than the right shoulder. And if we manage to break past 538, we're looking for an attempt to break out even more. I think that with Nvidia pumping, this is going to help the QQQ pump more. But before that happens, there might be a small pullback as soon as tomorrow to retest and grab liquidity around 535 or below. A little pullback would be completely healthy before we start to bounce and eventually try to break past 540 to really start pushing to new all-time highs near like the mid 540s, which I think the QQQ could be achieving. And I'm going to talk about exactly why that is in just a minute. The Russell 2000, same setup. Now we do have an inverse head and shoulders, but notice that we have this big wick right above, right over here. So the wick could be signifying that this might come down just a bit. So keep that in mind. There might be a small pullback on the Russell back down towards 224.75 or a little bit below that before it tries to bounce again. But there might be a little pullback to fill the imbalance below, especially if you look at the current setup. That's looking very, very probable to me. ES looks bullish, but here's the little catch. It might dip a little bit first before it really breaks down. Let me explain. So when you look at ES, you guys could tell that we got this nice breakout. We had this like downwards channel, and then we broke out of it, right? This was very, very bullish, right? Then we had the channel forming again like this before we started to break out of this and to continue even higher. So that's like what this is trying to do. Now, this makes me suspect that ES will go higher, but might get a pullback first before it goes even higher. Let me explain. So we have this high right here. ES has not hit the high, but we're starting to break structure to visit the high at 6180. I believe we're going to get back up there, but there might be a little pullback first. We might be pushing back down towards 6125 or so before some buyers defend at 6180 as the most likely possibility. So look for a small pullback to the 6100s before some buyers defend and start pushing us up to 6180 as the most likely possibility. I favor that, so please keep that in mind. For NQ is looking bullish because we're breaking structure right over here. We're trying to break structure like this, so watch this very closely. If NQ continues, we're looking for 22,400 is the most likely possibility. We could dip to about the lower 22,000s first, like 22,100 or even below that, just a little bit before it tries to break out for 22,400. This would complete the inverse head and shoulders, and it looks very probable on the chart. A small pullback and a bounce is very, very probable, so that's what I'm anticipating. For Bitcoin, we're kind of stuck in the middle right now. It's not really moving. There's not really much liquidity being drawn from this. We have support at 95,000, resistance around 98,000. I think we just kind of hover between those levels, at least for the time being. Going down to Nvidia, Nvidia is looking very interesting right now. It looks very bullish, actually. We'll see if we get any sort of pullback. Sometimes it just doesn't want to do that. It might just continue to uptrend. Before it continues to push, eventually it's going to fill the gap easily to about 143. And then eventually it's going to be pushing for 150, possibly right before earnings. So we might be looking for an attempt for 150 again. But at the very least, I see the mid 140s, 145 to 150 is likely coming over the next week or so. So keep that in mind, guys. This will likely continue to uptrend. Might dip a little bit first. It could grab liquidity around like 135, completely normal. That would be completely normal before it tries to bounce back up to about the gap fill and starts pushing to much higher levels. On Apple, we have a nice inverse head and shoulders double bottom. This is actually like a triple bottom right here. And we have an imbalance to fill, which makes me suspect we're going to be pushing for essentially 247 to 248. As long as we don't end up losing like 240, I think we favor 248 or so. For Netflix, we're looking a bit more bullish. We're making higher highs and higher lows. As long as we don't lose 1,032, we're favoring 1,060 plus and eventually higher levels. For Microsoft, we're looking for an inverse head and shoulders like pattern. So this is looking pretty good so far. As long as we're above 337, we're looking for an attempt to push up for essentially 345. If we lose 329, we're looking for a dip, but overall, this has potential with this inverse head and shoulders. So this could dip and then bounce, and we're going to be looking for essentially 350 as a target. I think MSTR has bullish potential. For Celsius, we're dipping a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if we do dip a bit more. We could dip like this back down towards like the 21s before it tries to break out like this. Look for a little bit more downside on Celsius before some buyers come back to defend. On Supermicro, I think this is following Nvidia. We also had some nice earnings. So in my opinion, I think this has potential to go all the way up towards like the 50 plus area. Might gap a little like this before it starts pushing for like the 50s. I think 50 to 52 is going to be tested. So I do anticipate a bit more upside on this, especially after a big bullish day. Typically, when you have a big 13% day, we won't just turn immediately. There might be a little bit of momentum remaining before we see a turn, at least in the share price. But for now, it remains more bullish. Palantir's bullish for now, but I do want to give you guys a concern about this. So when you zoom out and look at the daily, there are a bunch of gaps to fill below, so I do believe it's going to turn eventually. So I would not really buy it up here. Not financial advice when I say that. But For the short term, it is bullish. It is still technically bullish as long as you don't lose 115. We could be pushing for about 125. It might continue to uptrend. There's a bearish divergence developing. So even if it uptrends to like 125 or so, it could turn later on. So please keep that in mind, guys. There's going to be a risk of that at least as time goes on. Rivian's looking bullish. We have earnings on Thursday. There's a left shoulder ahead and then a right shoulder. This could be continuing to uptrend for like the 14.5 area. So it looks bullish for now. For SoFi, we look a bit more bullish. We're trying to break out here as long as you don't end up losing like 15.5. We might dip and bounce and continue to push for 16.75 or above. AMD is looking more bullish, especially as we have this resistance right here, which is where our white resistance line happens to be. So I wouldn't be surprised if we try to push back up for essentially the 114.8 area to like 115. We'll see if you reject or not, but I think we're going to likely push higher for like 115, so keep that in mind. For ARM is once again rejecting over and over again. We might be dipping closer to 155, and we'll see if we bounce or not, especially because of this imbalance down here. So we might dip lower before it tries to break out. For a coin, we have this big wick right here. We kind of rejected, so we'll have to see if we bounce or not. This will likely be dipping to about 268, so we'll see how things end up going. For Amazon, we have a head and shoulders like pattern here. We could be dipping closer to about 226, and we'll see if we bounce. But I do anticipate some downside. For Meta, as long as we don't end up losing 724, this will likely continue to push for the 740s. No sign of downside yet. Microsoft is going to likely be dipping to about 405, and then Google could also be looking at an inverse head and shoulders. There's going to likely be a left shoulder, head, and then a right shoulder. If we break past 189, we're looking for an attempt to get back up to about 191. If we look lower, we're going to be dipping back down. So we'll see how things end up going here, especially as we try to break out past 189. I think there's a good chance we try to push higher, at least from here. For GameStop, nice pump and dump. Might be retesting 26.7 before it dips lower. AMC is somewhat bullish. It might follow GameStop and chop around, dip to about 3.4. DJT is trading completely sideways. It's not really doing a whole lot. It might consolidate around this 30 area for now. The VIX is bearish. We'll see if we bounce first before it starts dipping lower, which suggests that the market may kind of like dip a little bit before it starts to break out. The 10-year is looking a little bit more bearish, and so is the dollar. The dollar might actually pop a bit before it dips lower against technically on a downtrend because the market's at all-time highs. So the market is going to likely see a small dip before it tries to bounce, and we might see Tesla follow that trend. For now, there's no sign of Tesla losing support. Unless we end up losing 348, I will be a little more concerned. Might dip a bit before it tries to bounce. So overall, it's doing a good job. So we'll see if the inverse head and shoulders pans out or not. I want to see Tesla break 362 to remain bullish. For now, it's still technically in this range. A little dip like this, and if as long as it holds support and it gets back above 362, then yes, in that case, it could remain bullish. Now, I am favoring that a bit more as the market tries to push, especially with Nvda. As long as Tesla does not get too much major bad news, we are favoring this setup. So we'll see how it goes. I thank you all so much for listening. I'll be back with another update for tomorrow. Until then, I'll see you guys very soon, and peace out.